That was some time ago, 1988. You would think in the last however many years, we possibly would have solved poverty. But according to a report from Child Poverty in Australia, that's the organisation, more than 950,000 children across the nation are experiencing food insecurity, poor housing conditions, and limited access to education and healthcare. And this is a rise. And one of those things that's making this number increase, as you would imagine, is housing and housing costs. Tony Pietropiccolo joins me. He's the Centre Care Director to talk about this research. Tony, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Paul. Thanks for taking the time to look at this report.
Well, it's one of those things that flabbergasts me, Tony, and I've mentioned this a couple of times on the program. I don't understand quite why in a wealthy country like Australia, we don't seem to be able to improve a lot around poverty, and especially poverty for children, and that can then manifest in lots of other ways later on. Can you tell me about this research? What's the benchmark? What do we consider poverty to be?
Well, poverty in Australia, because there are different benchmarks around the world, but for example, in Europe, most of it is at 60% of median income. So if you have less than 60% of median income, then you're in poverty. Whereas in Australia, you have to get down to 50% of median income before you're considered to be in poverty. And abject poverty is living when you're at 30% of the median income of Australians. So that's the measure that's used. But the interesting thing, Paul, is that we don't have an official measure in Australia for child poverty. And we have no way of knowing. We don't keep any stats on a national level. These statistics that are reported are statistics that are based on research by, for example, in this case, Bankwest Curtin Economics Centre, and they look at a whole heap of indicators to come to an understanding of the level of child poverty in Australia. So one of the things I'm part of, I'm chairing the End Child Poverty campaign in Australia that we began last year. We now have 180 organisations and individuals across Australia, all the child advocates and commissioners support the campaign, because it is increasingly becoming obvious that unless we do something significant in this area, it's only going to get worse. And you would have seen from the stats, I would imagine, that it's really over the last 4 years, it's gone up by 33%. So in other words, in the last 4 years, an additional 250,000 kids have gone into poverty. So we've got to do something. Yeah.
And that over a period of 3 or 4 or 5 years for a young kid living in that kind of situation, how does that affect things like education, social cohesion, a sense of well-being and where you're loved?
Incredibly. Yeah. I mean, you would have experienced some of it yourself, the impact that it has on you as a person, having lived in those conditions. Look, the research is very clear on this, Paul. If you live, for example, the first 4 years of your life in poverty as a child, it will impact on your emotional well-being, your psychological well-being, as well as your educational and health, long-term health. A large percentage of kids in that live in poverty for any period of time, quite a number of them will suffer long-term, lifelong effects from that experience, either emotional or health-wise. If you're living in, as you said, in a cockroach-infested place with poor sort of insulation and with mold on the walls, the chances are that your health is going to be impacted. A lot of people can get over that, but there'll be a percentage of people that won't. But what's equally important is that we're not creating the conditions under which we can allow our kids to maximize their potential. Because the thing that worries me is that we must be missing out on so many talented people purely because they don't get the opportunity, and purely because they're not in a condition where they can do the best that they can be, the best that they can be. And I think a responsibility we have as a nation is to create those conditions, and it is possible for us to do that.
And I think the other side is the community taking responsibility. I think sometimes the feeling can be you can walk past and it's not that there's children deserve to live in that, but you know, you can let them eat cake all you want, but they're beyond. The feeling can be they're beyond help when it can be. Sometimes it can be a change of the way they're educated at school, the change of social groups they're hanging around with, or some security when it comes to food and a roof over their head at an early stage, which will save you a lot of pain later on. Look, I would recommend, Tony, maybe people have a look at these stats. Where's a good place to go?
Well, just in our website, there's the End Child Poverty Campaign website. Just put in End Child Poverty Campaign, it should come up. And they will get a copy of this report. I would encourage people to look at it, because one of the problems we have, Paul, is that child poverty in Australia has become invisible. We don't keep stats on it. We don't talk about it. And what's happening is that we got an increasing number of children, as you can see by these statistics, where you've got nearly 1 million kids now living below the poverty line in Australia, which is a very confronting figure, because we're not paying attention to it. If you remember, I don't know if you remember, but during the Bob Hawke years, and Bob Hawke gets a bit of a rap because he said he'd end child poverty, but during those years, over a period of 6 years, he reduced child poverty from 14% to 8% purely by targeting certain payments appropriately and well. So it is possible for us to make a significant inroad into this. New Zealand has introduced a legislation that allows the government to focus on child poverty and have particular targets to meet. Now, that's what the End Child Poverty Campaign would want us to see our government do, and that is to have clear measures of child poverty, ensure that we have targets, whether it's in education, whether it's in relation to homelessness or housing, so that we can provide for our kids an environment in which they can be the best they can be. And I think we all have a responsibility towards that.
Recognising the benchmarks and doing something about it. Tony, Pietropiccolo, I appreciate your time. Thank you for the conversation.
And thank you very much, Paul, for helping us to spread the message.